You can have your own house, visit your parents, and do a lot more in Starfield. Bethesda names this one of their most ambitious and deepest video games yet, but until we get to see that with our own eyes, here are over 50 incredible details that you absolutely need to know about Starfield. Right from the very beginning, Starfield features a few survival mechanics, some of which No Man's Sky veterans will likely recognize because pulling out the scanner will reveal the planetary detailed view. This includes a screen of the number of resources, fauna and flora elements uncovered on the current planet, which will count towards a total planetary survey. Looking at the compass in this view also reveals the planet/moon name, its type, as well as a few other important indicators, including the temperature range, oxygen levels, and gravity. In the normal view, the compass also features our oxygen and CO2 levels, likely also a survival mechanic, but during combats and jetpack use, we can see it being quickly depleted and then quickly replenishing it once the character lands. On the right side, nothing too out of the ordinary. We have the current HP levels, equipped weapon, as well as its total magazine size and ammo count beneath it. It's not just UI elements though, but also visual indicators physically appearing on our characters. The game can be played in both the first and the third person perspective, no surprise over there, but weapons currently selected do get visually displayed on the side of our jetpacks. Speaking of jetpacks, these are fully functional as Starfield does feature a lot more vertical gameplay than before, which would make it much easier to jump over gaps, reach higher vantage points, or simply just have fun. From the gameplay preview, we know that there's at least a few jetpack types, from the more bulky examples to the more subtle and compact options, which will likely also provide different advantages and disadvantages as one would presume. The most impressive factor is Starfield's space exploration system, which will be needed as we get to reach over 100 solar systems containing more than 1,000 planets, fully explorable. Not having a seamless transition between planets and space is kind of a bummer, but I guess that's the price we have to pay for playing Skyrim in space. Going into the galaxy view reveals important star system data, such as spectral class, temperature range, as well as the number of planets and moons in it. Survey levels are once again present, so discovering an entire solar system will likely present some gameplay benefits. What's really noteworthy here is Bethesda's attention to system details. Here is Alpha Centauri, for example, currently categorized as a G2 spectral class, or better called a yellow dwarf, kind of like our own sun. This begs the question, will we get to see our own solar system in Starfield, given how close we are to Alpha Centauri in real life? The preview has a pretty cool Easter egg that I'm pretty sure is a nod towards Mars, with what appears to be one of the two rovers still functional to this day, so I think that there is a slight chance we might get to see that. Landing on planets is done through a loading screen, and you can either choose its main capital if there is one present, or any random procedurally generated location on the same planet. Planets also feature a similar information view, and there will be several biome types to explore, each with their own gameplay functions. Like for example, we know that lifeless dead rock planets won't have much to explore but will be rich in resources. Such resources can include anything from plants all the way up to minerals, and of course the scanners will reveal if these are collectible. Collecting hard minerals, like for example iron, is done with a mining tool called the cutter, and there's likely going to be other types we can purchase or maybe upgrade later on in the game. These resources in turn can be funneled into research projects or crafting better items, as Starfield does feature a deep crafting system. So for example, with some of the iron that you mined, you can run a research project to get a better barrel mod upgrade that can be physically attached to any of your weapons, but you can run up to 5 projects at the same time in the project view from any of the following categories, including pharmacology, food and drink, outpost development, weaponry, and finally equipment. Some of them will even provide armor or weapon mods, while others can provide resources or consumables, or any combination of these. One thing that truly got me excited about Starfield, which is why I also wanted to cover it this early in the video, is space combat and space exploration. As a long-time No Man's Sky player, I would imagine anyone who played this game or Star Citizen or any other similar space game before is probably losing their minds for the possibilities that a proper AAA space exploration experience like Starfield has in store for them. The preview featured a lot of these asteroid fields, which were pretty cool, a lot of fighting, but but the highlights for me personally were definitely the space stations. They seem to be the equivalent of space dungeons, and there's a strong indication that these are fully explorable, as the preview features our ships docking into one such facility in the middle of freaking space. So the alien fight scene that we saw briefly during the presentation is likely from one such place, and I can only imagine the role-playing capabilities and what cool things you can extract out of this, not just in terms of like the items you get out of it, but in terms of the experience. Shipbuilding is even more mind-blowing to me as someone who's been asking for it for years in No Man's Sky. Leaving aside the fact that you can mix and match different parts from different manufacturers however you want, there's also a very important gameplay function over here. These all influence your stats and performance in different ways that you can see here at the bottom. So you can install firepower capabilities like lasers, ballistics, and missiles, or also go with more defenses or utility like hull strength, shield levels, or just having more cargo space. Gameplay wise, mobility and top speed also being taken into account will heavily influence how you maneuver your ship and how fast and far you can travel, which can be both important in space exploration and space combat likewise. The cherry on top for me is again definitely the interior, which is fully rendered, and not just that, fully populated with NPCs. In this case, companions that you get to meet during gameplay, during the story, that you get to make connections with and then just get on your ship, be it just for the looks of it, for the heck of it, maybe you just enjoy a character, but I would assume they might also give us certain benefits to certain actions. And yeah, Bethesda already mentioned that they also serve a function, which is to upkeep your ship. Of course, one of the most important companions will likely be VASCO. There's a lot of these companions all around Starfield, not just our own variant, but even in some of the main cities. He has more of a utilitarian purpose, so he's there to carry your cargo, maybe store a portion of it, maybe even like use some of its picks to just mine for you. That would be really nice. But Bethesda has confirmed that it's also useful to install firepower capabilities and have a bit more protection if the situation needs it. Customization wise, this is an RPG at the end of the day, so the game includes a wide selection of clothing choices, armor pieces, and sets that you can mix and match to truly reach any desired look. Of course, all of that roleplay starts with the character creator, which Bethesda has named to be some of the deepest they have created so far, and at first glance it seems to be pretty standard. It includes a lot of body and face options and changes, and for the first time ever also a walk style selection. But the most important are going to be probably the background and the traits. These will give you access to certain skills and abilities from the very beginning, and of course this is also part of the game's further progression. One thing to note is that Starfield does seem to remove the trait distribution screen that some of the previous Bethesda games had, including for example Fallout 4, or at the very least that was not present in this screen menu right here. Instead, it seems the game opts for just having background archetypes and traits as a form of compensating for that. Speaking of skill trees, the game will feature 5 of these in total, including physical, social, combat, science, and tech, all focusing on different aspects of the gameplay. Depending on the background that you choose, you can start with up to 3 of these skills randomly depending on the archetype that you pick. So for example, if you go with a diplomat, for example, you will get 3 starting skills from the social skill tree, but if you go with something else, you can get a mix and match between maybe combat or robotics or anything else in between. A distinct and rather noteworthy category of different skills are the traits. These are completely different than the skill trees, and it's likely something that we don't get too much access to outside of this screen and maybe a few other options during gameplay. But traits, these are a completely separate section that provide certain benefits but also come with downsides. Like for example, introvert helps a lot with playing solo as it gives you more endurance, but you also get less endurance when you play with other human companions. Or if you choose raised enlightened, you get a ton of bonuses with certain vendors of certain factions, but lose benefits with vendors of other factions and so on. One thing that got me a bit worried, especially in terms of combat, was the fact that Bethesda, when it comes to skills, once more opted for a lot of passive bonuses, like these ones that just give additional weapon damage boosts, and there's a lot of others similar to them. The same level of stiffness can be seen in the combat in Starfield, again pretty much a staple for Bethesda games, but there's a rather telling lack of a VATS system being present, or should I say not being present this time around in the gameplay preview. Chances are that they just didn't focus on it during this presentation, or maybe they removed it completely, but I kinda wish that was not the case. Weapons do come in different shapes and sizes though, and that kinda makes up for that, from regular guns to laser weapons, throwable grenades, and likely much more. I do appreciate the fact that many of these get displayed on our characters, also the fact that they can heavily be customized, pretty much like in previous Bethesda games from the looks of it, but I kinda hope that they did a little bit more in terms of presentation than just showing just one type of a weapon, in this case ballistic weapons, though there was one laser rifle that we've seen after the character exited one of these first facilities. Since we're on the subject of facilities, the game will feature a lot of handcrafted locations, despite the fact that it also includes a lot of procedural generation for many of the 1000 plus planets that Starfield features, mainly in terms of dungeons, abandoned research facilities, and other types of occupied outposts filled with enemies and likely loot that we will lose a lot of time into. We also have a first look over here at one such abandoned research facility. This time around, it seems to be occupied by pirates from the Crimson Fleet. By the way, this is a faction that you can totally join in the full game, but of course it's gonna happen much later, so we're gonna talk about that in just a little bit. Starfield will feature lots of secret facilities, underground caves, and dungeons filled with a lot of dangers, and we've seen some of these dangers and how they look, including of course the types of enemies that we get to fight, including not just humanoids but also some of these alien creatures. One thing that I was a bit disappointed about was the fact that many of the city shots did not include any alien species, at least when it comes to sentient alien species, like maybe something like ET over there, or I don't know, anything rather than just humans. But looting and lockpicking is also making a return. Obviously, enemies can be pickpocketed just like the usual, assuming that you stay out of the line of sight or they don't detect you. Or you can straight away just take them down and then loot them via the take or transfer actions. Lockpicking is also making a return from the previous Bethesda games, but with a slight difference. You now need to match a short puzzle with the circle gaps in the center by choosing the options below. Each attempt will cost a digipick, and this crate in particular gave a pretty cool energy rifle called the Equinox, which the character used immediately in combat. On the same subject of finding goodies, one small, little detail that many might have missed is with this watch right here that appears to be used to open up this path ahead. Now this, as a No Man's Sky player, reminds me of the Atlas Pass, an upgradable kind of like item that would grant you more and more access to hidden areas, secret locations, and hidden doors. And behind of them you would find a lot more rewards than usual, like really useful resources or upgrade modules that you would definitely use for your character, ships, and so on and so forth. So I would assume this is a similar one applied to Starfield, and yeah, honestly, I would also see an upgrade path for it to unlock more and more such areas as we progress in the full story. Now, we also talked about capital cities and factions. The gameplay presentation featured a partial look into New Atlantis, which is the capital city of the United Colonies, and of course the place where you as a player can join Constellation, one of the game's many factions, very early in Starfield. This appears to be way more imposing and large than any other city created so far in a Bethesda game, which can obviously be seen both from afar. There's a landing dock area just outside of the city, but also the cityscape is rather large with tall buildings, including the United Colonies one right here in the center. I've also appreciated the fact that there's a lot more random NPCs this time around and a lot of locations from the looks of it, so that seems to be quite exciting. Speaking of colonies, New Atlantis isn't the only capital city. There are actually 3 more that we haven't seen, though New Atlantis is definitely the biggest. There will be a lot more such cities and human settlements scattered throughout Starfield, including ones that seem to be abandoned from the looks of it, or at the very least a lot more run down. Of course, there are at least 8 joinable factions in Starfield that we know of, and these United Colonies and the Constellation being just one of them. Another one that we've seen was the Free Star Collective, a similar alliance of different star systems that also have their own capital, and yeah, from the lore it seems that they were at war at some point with the United Colonies, so there's probably gonna be some gameplay, lore, and story options to be made that will likely affect the end of the game, as it's usually the case. Also, the Crimson Fleet, which are pretty much the pirates that we've seen both in the research facility early in the presentation, and of course the ones we fought in space, are a joinable faction. Obviously, you can play as a good or a bad character, but you can also join a bad faction, even if you technically speaking play as a good character. And this time around, Bethesda confirmed that you can kinda act like an undercover cop or a spy and report on their, well, not so law-abiding deeds. Now, one thing that I found truly fascinating is the fact that you can own, depending on your choices, a small house and even have parents and visit them, which is of course totally separate than the, well, base construction that the game also features. So this depends largely on what choices you pick when it comes to your traits when you create a character. Specifically, if you pick kid stuff, your parents are pretty much alive and well, you can visit them, but you also get to pay them a 10% fee of your earnings. And then there's also Starter Home, which gives you the possibility to own a small house on a peaceful little moon, but it comes with a 50k mortgage on it. So this dynamic right here definitely seems really awesome from a roleplay perspective. There's assumingly also a gameplay benefit here that we don't know of yet, maybe some interactions we can't otherwise have, but I really enjoy this kind of stuff. Might seem small at start, but just the fact that it's there and it's an option makes so much for the gameplay. And of course, how could we forget about base building? I covered this last because, well, pretty much, well, since Fallout 4 we have a lot of base building in Bethesda games. It seems to be heavily, again, No Man's Sky inspired. You go on a place, you set up one of these beacons. This also has a range and a total max in which you can create and set up a, well, settlement. I found this to be a little bit better than how it was in Fallout 4 from what I remember. Most important here is the fact that you can toggle between a normal first-person view as it was previously into a, well, top-down view that should make placement that much easier. This was one of my biggest gripes, if I remember correctly, from Fallout 4, at the very least in its beginning stages. Of course, structure-wise, there are a lot of modules to pick between, different manufacturers, different bonuses and layouts, and there's at least 10 or so of these sections that I'm seeing right here, so probably a lot more that we can place, including obviously decorations and yeah, just things to make this base a lot more homey. Now, there are a lot of other aspects to think of here, also when it comes to the survival elements we've talked about at the start of the video. So you do have to worry about your cargo limits, the crew that you get to recruit, because there are crew members to recruit and upkeep these bases, as well as the amount of power that you generate to just have things running. So I don't think it's going to be out of the ordinary to just like settle up on a certain moon or a planet, create one of these bases and extract certain resources that you might funnel into maybe making a source of living, or maybe creating something, crafting a powerful suit of armor or a weapon, which sounds quite enticing. Anyway, pretty long video. We went over all of these details. There's plenty more, of course, and the game to me looks exciting. Let me know down below if you have any concerns about it, if you're excited about Starfield, have you played Star Citizen or maybe No Man's Sky before, and are you looking forward to what Bethesda has in store for this genre. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.